Really excited to have Tenderfoot here. Tenderfoot are an eco-theatre collective based in Ormskirk. The project started when there were students at Edgehill University, combining a passion for sustainability with a love of theatre. And Tenderfoot aimed to use theatre to raise awareness of climate change-related issues, while developing new and improved ways to deliver live performance in a more planet-friendly way. So they've toured the production across the country in a sustainable way. They've got an exciting short film coming out, and they've been shortlisted as one of only 8 finalists for the Net Hero Award at the Small Awards 2023, and nominated for the Alumni Award at Edgehill University's 2023 Career Awards. So we're incredibly excited to have some of the best in the business in sustainable theatre to teach us all about it today. Over to you guys.
Very kind of you.
Yeah, it was super
very
kind.
kind.
Here, so thank you.
Yeah. So what we're going to do, can I just double check quickly, is everyone able to see the screen? Has everyone got that presentation screen up in front of them? Is that all okay? Yeah, just like little thumbs up or anything is fab. Gorgeous. Right. If anyone does have any problems with the tech at any point through this, do just drop a little note into the chat. We'll keep an eye on it, and hopefully we'll try and fix any technical issues as they arise. But it's really lovely to be here. I'm Georgie. I'm the company director for Tenderfoot Theatre. I am a researcher and I'm also a practitioner. And my kind of specialism within eco-theatre looks at multi-species performance, so looking at plants as performers and how we can perform with other species in ethical ways. Yeah, that's kind of my shtick.
And I'm Kate, so I am the designer of Tenderfoot Theatre. I'll be going into my methods later on in the presentation, but my kind of specialism is looking at new exciting ways to create like costumes and set in a sustainable way.
So we're just 2 members of an 8-part collective. We're going to talk you through a little bit about the company, about what we do, our projects, and then go into some of the methods that we use and some of the approaches that we take. We've had the privilege of having a look at the handbooks that everyone's working with. So the production handbook and the green handbook, they are fantastic. They're brilliant resources. They look great. So we know that you will have kind of a base understanding anyway of things like the Theatre Green Book, and will already be thinking about how you can work sustainably. So really our involvement today is just going to be sort of going over some of the things that maybe we haven't considered, and also going through some of the weird and wonderful ways that we do it as well, because we're quite experimental. So we'll kick things off. Today we're going to be talking about eco-theatre and sustainable theatre in general. So sustainable performance from right at the beginning of the process all the way through to the end of a show. So where do we begin? We begin by looking at the here and now. So the theatre industry and the creative industries as a whole are one of the oldest industries in existence. We have been creating and making and playing and telling stories for as long as we have been on this planet, which is great. It means a lot of the methods that we use have been passed down and developed all the way through the entire history of the industry. What has happened, though, is in the last sort of 50 years, we haven't been moving quite as with the times as maybe we ought to have been. And so theatre's picked up some bad habits, and other creative industries have picked up some bad habits. It can be quite a wasteful industry. And essentially what we're here to look at today is all the different ways that we can potentially help the industry go greener, and how we can get involved in making that sustainable work. So a few of the things that are currently at play. This is what we call the kind of performing arts footprint. So these are just some of the ways that theatre is contributing to the overall carbon footprint of the creative industries. So we're looking at things like emissions from audiences and touring companies travelling nationally and internationally. You think for every show that you put on, you've got to cover not just the shows, but also the rehearsal periods. You've got your entire team, the whole crew, the whole cast, everyone working in the building, everyone attending the show. And obviously that footprint can increase based on whether or not it's a local production all the way through to like a full international tour. When you then do get into the building, we're then looking at things like poor insulation, poor boilers, lack of energy efficiency in kind of theatre buildings. So many theatres are so old and they're beautiful, gorgeous, gorgeous buildings, but it means that they've not been purpose built with things like good insulation. You know, some of the newer theatres that are being built are built to go green, which is fantastic. But unfortunately, that's not always the case. When we look at the show itself, we're then looking at things like the use of cheap or non-degradable materials. Non-degradable is essentially just the opposite of biodegradable. So it's things that don't break down. Certain plastics and materials like that just over the course of their life just won't erode or will erode very, very, very painfully slowly for things like set pieces and props and costumes. Most of these materials then end up in landfill, or they are so niche and so single use that they can't then be used for any other purpose, and they just end up. We're then looking at things like food and beverage waste in on-set catering. So that's every time you go to an audition or a show or whatever in their catering, obviously mapping that catering out appropriately. To cover things like food mileage and to minimise food waste. We could be much better at things like excessive or inefficient energy use in lighting and sound. So quite a lot of theatres now are transitioning into using LEDs. LEDs are much, much better. They're more versatile. You can use them for more things, so you get more use out of the power that you are generating. They run at less power and they produce less light pollution as well. So LED is fantastic, but again, not all theatre spaces have those set up. Then looking at things like single use or purpose-built non-reusable set pieces. So this is what I was saying before about how if you have a particularly niche show or a niche thing, I don't know, the example that keeps coming to mind in my head is if anyone has seen Beetlejuice, the giant snake in Beetlejuice, the big stripy black and white snake is very, very iconic for the show. But that would be desperately out of place in any other play. Having this giant, very obviously branded snake, you know, and if that's been made with materials that can't be reused or can't be taken apart again, then what do we do with that set piece when we're done with the show? Because it's not the kind of thing that can just transition into another show, like potentially, I don't know, a wooden chair could, in terms of having multiple uses. And then we're looking at the misuse and abuse of advertising materials. So I don't know if anyone was at the Edinburgh Fringe this year, but if you were, or you might have seen it on the news, the bin men went on strike, and in the middle of the Fringe, which we absolutely support and they were well within their rights to do, but where it left the city was an absolute ocean of people's flyers and posters and things like that. They tend to be printed on, you know, using chemical-based inks, and also quite a lot of them have like a waterproof covering, which is usually plastic-based, which means they just don't break down. And so the city was just getting full of thousands, literally thousands of flyers. People potentially overprint. They don't try and minimize the amount of advertising materials that they use. And then, you know, there is more of a leaning now towards digital advertising, which can be a lot better. Thankfully, we were not a part of the flyering problem in Edinburgh. Our flyers were printed on, so they were biodegradable paper, using plant-based inks that were literally designed to dissolve and be non-toxic. So as soon as it rained, any of ours that might have been, you know, picked up and then left out were able to just break down and go back to being natural. So this is kind of what we're looking at, all of these different things at play within the industry. Couple of quotes that have been pulled from some research done by Julie's Bicycle. So the first one just says, the music industry is estimated to produce 500,000 tons of carbon emissions each year, while the film and television industry was responsible for an estimated 140,000 tons of emissions a year in Los Angeles alone. And that was back in 2017. So it's estimated that those emissions are now going to be much higher. By comparison, we've just been working on a short film, and we've just finished the carbon calculations for that short film, and it came in at 0.006 tons of CO2, which is about the same as a 500-gram pack of beef mince for the entire show, which we're quite proud of, and we're lucky we were able to film that quite locally. So we're looking at quite a carbon footprint here. The second one just says London's theatre industry is responsible for 50,000 tonnes of CO2 emissions per annum, so per year, with audience travel estimated at an additional 35,000. London's theatre industry is obviously huge, absolutely massive, and lots of people will travel quite significant distances to be able to see those shows, which explains quite a lot of the carbon footprint there. So we get an idea of what we're faced with. So what is eco-theatre? Eco-theatre is the response. Eco-theatre is looking at the current state of the industry and the trajectory that we're heading in, and it's looking at the ways that we can make theatre go greener. There's a couple of different ways that we can do that. So eco-theatre is theatre that is made using sustainable methods of design and practice, or it can be theatre that covers sustainable content or raises awareness of climate-based issues, or it can be both. And that is what we decided to do when we set up Tenderfoot. So, an introduction to Tenderfoot Theatre. You've heard a bit from Josh already, kind of how we started and what we're up to. But we're an eco-theatre collective based in Lancashire. We're mostly based in Ormskirk. And we make sustainable work using sustainable methods to tell sustainable stories. So we take that kind of dual approach to making eco-theatre. So I'm going to give you a bit of context into the company, into what we do, and the projects that we've covered so far. So we started back when we were students. Some of us came from the climate activism side, some of us came from the theatre side, and we really found that meeting point, looking at the industry that we were about to graduate into and thinking, how can we make this something that we can pass on to future generations? And how can we minimize the footprint that we are making with the work that we go on to create? So we started with one single project. And that's honestly all we thought it was going to be at that stage. Quite a lot of us are researchers. So it was just let's see what we can do. And the company's kind of grown from there. So one of the earliest projects we did was a community intervention project called Daisy Chain Tag. So this was just after lockdown, and it was aimed at reconnecting people with green spaces and other people in their community after so long being stuck indoors and isolated from others. So you can see on the floor, we've got the kind of chalk daisies. We had our daisy people. So that's me on the left with my daisy crown on. And we went out armed with bags of chalk and encouraged people to draw a social distance length worth of daisy chains with this chalk on the floor, and then encouraged others to pick up each other's daisy chains. And it really became a moment of play and a moment of reconnection for lots of people that had spent very, very, very long indoors. We then moved into Impact. So Impact was our first full feature production. It was a kind of one-off installation piece done in our first residency at the Chapel Arts House, and it was developed for the Climate Change Theatre Action Festival in 2021. It was essentially an anthology of different climate change plays that were commissioned by the festival that we mushed together and turned into a bedtime story for our future children that told the story of our planet from conception to narrowly avoided destruction. So I have just a little clip here from the Impact Process documentary. We made a short documentary about how the piece was made, and that's available on our website. So this is just a small extract from that. It's just the Okay, so I think potentially the sound wasn't coming through there. It's okay, the images were the most important part. But essentially impact was, I can show you some of the, oh, is this still coming up on the thing? Oh, why is this doing that? Sorry, I'm not sure what it's doing. Ah, there we go. Perfect. So sorry. So impact was a compostable piece. So the entire set was made of natural material. Kate's going to go into a bit more detail on that later. But it was all made of natural material that had been sourced locally. And by the time we were done with the production, it all went into compost and a couple of other places. But it is still composting now in the bin, literally just out the back of TFHQ, and continues to go on to flower beds. But every element in that set was compostable. Then we moved into our touring production, Stop the World, We're Getting Off, which was a bold departure from Impact. Impact was very art-based, kind of devised piece. Stop the World was our first piece of new writing, and it was just a straight play. Essentially, it was set in Clapham South Tube Station, and it looked at eco-anxiety surrounding family planning. So lots of people are very nervous as to know whether or not to have children, or whether or not having children is the right thing to do in the face of climate change. And so Stop the World was really it was a love letter to everyone going through that anxiety. It was a love story. It followed Ava and Caden, our couple on the poster there, as they went through the process of wanting to have a baby at the end of the world, and looking at all the different ways that people power can be the right move forward. It validated all of the anxieties people feel without, we hope, without kind of glorifying this idea of apocalypse. And so hence the tagline, not the apocalypse that you're thinking of. Again, I've got a little extract from the trailer. There might not be sound. So if there's not sound, I apologize. But here's so a little teaser from Stop the World there. So Stop the World went on tour from June through to October last year. And we're going to talk to you in a minute about all the different sustainable methods that went into making that show. And then once we got back from Stop the World, we then started our residency at the Art Centre in Ormskirk. And this is just a little photo from Slick, which is our new film that is actually premiering this weekend, this Sunday. And it is a look at the effects of pollution on our bodies and our health. So I will pop some details of that at the end of this talk. So, eco-theatre. Tenderfoot Theatre follow three fundamental principles when it comes to eco-theatre, and they are these. So the first one, self-explanatory, is eco-theatre. So telling sustainable stories using sustainable methods and embedding sustainability at every stage of production. Now, this is something that you guys seem to be doing well already. Having had a look at the green handbooks, it's something that you're already thinking about kind of at every stage. The thing with sustainability is it's not something that you can you can't make a show and then think about how you're going to make it sustainably. You have to be thinking about sustainability from the very beginning. So really embedding it in every single thing that you do is at the heart of good eco-theatre. The second principle is creative action. So creative action is finding the meeting place between sustainability and creativity to breed innovation and resilience in community groups. It's really about being experimental and creative with the action that you take and finding new ways to do things. Even if you think you found a solution, there's got to be a way for you to do that even better. And so we're constantly evolving. And the final one is reconnection. So we look at reconnecting people and places and nature, and approaching from a place of humanity without anthropocentricity. So anthropocentricity refers to looking at the state of the world with humans at the center. So what we try to do is, with every story we tell, obviously we're telling it from a human perspective, but think about all the different ways that we can talk about the planet as a collective and a full ecosystem that we are just a part of, we're not separate to. So the 5 things that we're going to have a look at over the course of the next sort of 40 minutes are, we're going to look at time travel, we're going to look at the idea of a performance environment, we're going to look at eco-costuming, empathy and the hope principle, and how to run a sustainable studio. So this is essentially just a crash course in everything Tenderfoot do to make the theatre that we make. So kicking things off, time travel. The beautiful thing about theatre is that it has the ability to time travel. No other medium does it in quite the same way. You can watch a film, you can watch a TV show, you can look at a painting, and your body, while it can be completely absorbed in that medium, will know that it is not there with them. There's something about live performance that you get the full sensory experience of what you are watching. It's a full emotional lived experience, and you can feel like you've been picked up and dropped into a completely different world. Now, with that comes great responsibility. There is a quote from David Attenborough that talks about the fact that we will not seek to protect something that we have no relation to. We won't look to protect a world that we don't feel a connection to. And so building connection is absolutely at the heart of good eco-theatre. So what we're looking at is this ability to physiologically travel through time and space. We can pick people up, we can pick up a full audience, and we can offer them the chance to experience different stories that relate to climate change. Sorry, one sec. So this might look like showing a positive future. It could be that we tell the kind of story that looks at, we all make the right choices and everything is able to be solved, and this is the world that we could potentially be building. And so we might use, for example, we recently did a piece with Edgehill University that looked at Gaia and the idea of Mother Earth and greenery. And we can pick people up and plant them into that beautifully lush and green world and offer them the chance at a lived experience of what that might be like in a way that we can't access living in the here and now. Alternatively, we can also have the power to offer a negative future. And we can then start to look at what the world might look like if things don't change. And once again, offer that kind of lived experience and the emotional resonance of being able to sit in that place and experience as close as we're going to get to firsthand of what that future might look like. So one way that we do that is through the development of a performance environment. So I'm going to hand over to Kate, and she is going to talk you through what a performance environment is and a lot of the production elements that go into creating an eco-theatrical piece.
Hi guys, so as Georgie said, yeah, I'm the designer of Tenderfoot. Now, my job is to handle all things from costume, set, props, hair, makeup, even graphic design and the company identity visually. So I've got a lot of things going on. So I like to take a holistic approach to design. So holistic world building, that is approaching the theatre design, looking at the whole world as one thing, not just in individual parts. So we're not just looking at costume separately or just set or just acting, we're having it all together and we are creating this entire new world for the audience. I find that this approach allows us to embed sustainability from the very start of the process, right the way through, because then you're looking at everything as a whole and everything has that sustainability focus. So the idea of building an entire world is really important to our practice. And the key method we use is called performance environment. Now, our definition of performance environment is a transformative sensory setting which blurs the boundaries between stage and audience. So by transformative, we mean that the whole space is turned into a brand new world and it remains for the whole piece. So we build a world and then we place the action into it. It doesn't change dramatically around the action. So we might bring extra bits of furniture in or move things around, but overall the setting stays the same. And this is different to a lot of other productions. So if you looked at a West End performance, you might see that they might use backdrops and change them often, and big giant set pieces that they might change around to take you to different places as they follow the story. We're looking at the opposite of that. So we're looking at telling the story of the space and placing the action into it. We like there to be a kind of sensory aspect to the staging. So it could be something like soundscape, or it could be smells, or it could be tactile, so something that the audience can touch. And it might be a good visual experience as well. And we find that a good element to this is the entrance. So what do you want the audience to see when they enter the space? Because that's the moment that you can grab the audience and you can take them into a new. And finally, we're looking to blur the boundaries. So we're looking to take the audience by the hand and bring them into that world. We want them to feel like we're sharing the same space together. So we're all part of that same story. So we might do this in a number of ways. It might be physically talking to the audience, physically interacting with the audience, or it might just be bringing some of the action to them, it might be interacting amongst them in the crowd. Just anything to make them feel like they are part of the story too. So I want to apply this method to two examples that Georgie showed earlier. So first I want to look at impact. And here is our lovely set for impact. So for our transformation element, I think it's quite obvious. We brought the outdoors indoors, and we created a full ecosystem using soil, bark, sand, logs, you name it, we had it. And the space evolved throughout. So we transformed that indoors to an outdoor setting. For a sensory element, the soil itself is really intense. We walked in that room and it just hit you every time. And the audience loved that. The second they walked into that room, they felt like they were outdoors. It was quite strange because it was a bit cold. And we had things like smoke and haze to create that kind of misty atmosphere. And it was really lovely environment. And then we also blurred the boundaries. So audience members had to walk across the soil to get to their seats because we set it in the round. And we had this lovely story that we always remember of the gentleman who he stopped as he was entering, and he just bent down and grabbed a fistful of the dirt. And he just took a moment to just have a little look at the setting, and he had this dirt in his hands. And we asked him afterwards, why did you feel the need to pick up the dirt? What was calling you about dirt? And he was like, just wanted to see if it was real. and we loved that because we're always looking to inspire curiosity and to not take the line of performer and audience so literally. We always want to cross that boundary because that space was as much for the audience as it. We had a section where we got the audience to fill in the blanks on a story. So we were telling the story of modern life, and as we went through the story, we'd ask questions to the audience. And these questions, they ranged from things quite simple, so things such as we're walking down the road, what is the name of the road? And then we'd have an audience member just give the name of the road. And this ranged up to quite complex questions. So we had ones like, what is a locally grown seasonal vegetable in the current season? And that made the audience go, oh, I don't know actually. What is seasonal right now? And that made the audience think. And we also had a very interesting question about who does a lot of work and is not paid enough for it. And that caused a bit of debate in the room, doesn't it? And in that moment, and this was all during a theatre show, it felt like everyone in the audience was doing their bit to contribute, and it felt like it was an open discussion, it was a community, and it was everyone's story. So we were all involved. Now I want to share with you Stop the World, and I want to apply this method to Stop the World because it was such a different piece. So it wasn't conceptual or experimental like Impact was, it was naturalistic and it was focused on realism. And the reason I'm showing both these examples is because I want to show that no matter what style of play or story that you are telling, you can apply these methods and get similar. So our setting for Stop the World, it used backdrop, it used lighting and soundscape, and we really wanted to create illusion of being in a bunker. So the stage that you see here is the Rose Theatre. Now, this is a huge space, but we've cut it right down. I think we only used about a third of the space because we cut it off with these walls at the back just to create that really claustrophobic bunker feel. And we did a lot of research into the bunker as it was a real bunker underneath Clapham South Tube Station. So here's us on our little field trip. And here's some pictures of the real life. Now, we used lots of the real details, such as the signs from the original bunker. And we also have, you just look in the bottom left corner, there is some graffiti on the wall. Now, I believe this is from the Windrush workers that were housed in this bunker. And we used this graffiti in one of our monologues in the play. Hayden, a character, is very hopeful. He's delivering a monologue about the hope for the future, and he references all the past people who lived there, and they also had the same hope he had, and he could feel it in the walls. And we really wanted to include these little realistic details just to make that transformation complete and make it completely amazing. From a sensory point of view, we had a lot of visual and sound sensory things. So we had the lighting was flickering throughout. Our lovely theatre technicians, Fran and Phoebe, they had to be completely alert the whole time because they every now and then they just flicker the lights to make sure it was accurate. And then we had a soundscape running the whole time of generators, pipes, clinking, all of that sort of stuff that made you feel like you were underground. And then we had, as everyone entered, the actors were actually on stage just going about their daily life. And it really made the audience feel as though they had stepped into a moment in this group's life. And then to blur the boundaries, the performers did directly address the audience members. And we also moved in and amongst the crowd, and we had a scene where everything was dark, and then we had performers with torches in the audience. And suddenly it made it feel like you're not entering a theatre and waiting for the show to begin. You were entering the show. And you feel like you've stepped into a slice of a timeline that existed before you and will continue to exist after the shows. And that's at the core of the sustainability aspect. We want to create a story which we're all part of. We want to create a community. We don't want to have people on the sidelines just watching. We're all in it together. So I think that's where it connects to sustainability. It reflects the realities of this fight for change, because we don't want anyone to be on the sidelines. We are all in this together, and that's the goal really with creating these environments in this world. It's not just staging a play, it's about bridging the gap and bringing people in. So on a practical level, where are we actually sourcing things from? Well, we call it tactical sourcing. And the best way I can define this for you or sum it up for you is to show you this. So this is our lovely thank you post that we put out at the end of Impact. Now, this showcases all the different people, organisations, places that helped contribute towards the show in some kind of way. So you've got people such as Staging Change, who we got on board with, and they're a great network of eco-creatives.
Unfortunately, don't exist anymore, but they have been replaced with EcoStage, who are wonderful. And I would really recommend checking them out.
You've also got the woods there, Rough Woods, which is our local woods where we got sticks and leaves from. So we wanted to thank the woods. We've got the Scouts. What was it? The Scouts gave us again?
Scouts had the tree stumps. Honestly, with Impact, so much of it was just the community pulling together and going, oh, I've got this thing that I'm about to get rid of. And so I mean, waste management is a huge thing that we try to work off with tactical sourcing. If there is something about to be thrown out and we might be able to have a use for it, we will find a use for it. So a lot of the set was it was farmers and it was people doing up their gardens, and it was just all this stuff that was gonna kind of just, I'll just take it to the tip, and so it all got loaded into a Fiat 500 instead and came back with us.
So we had people's decking, we had all sorts. And I remember there was a time that Georgie was driving to a rehearsal and she was like, sorry guys, I'm late. I've just seen a big sheet of plastic in the gutter and I need to save it. So all sorts of things. That's why we call it tactical. It's about banding together. And I think it's not just about finding these physical items. It's about creating that connection then, because all of these people are now friends. Acquaintances. We've made that connection and they've all been part of something.
And just because something's being thrown out doesn't necessarily mean it's trash. One of the best sourcing tips that we could pass on is speak to local businesses, particularly if they're running events. Event management companies or anyone that's running like, oh, we've got a Christmas party on, we've got an Easter thing. The amount of rabbits and eggs and daisies and things that are going to be about to be thrown out because the Easter weekend's just been. If there's any use that you can have for those kind of things, they're the kind of people that you can talk to, because then you can kind of intercept them before they make it to landfill.
And you're doing them a favour by taking it off them.
Exactly.
So then what happens when it's all done? Well, things need a home. So we build to dismantle. Now, this is something that we like to implement at the very start of the design process. We want to design with an end goal in mind. So we don't want anything to ever come to us, be used that one time in that performance, and then never see the light of day again and just go to landfill. That's not how we work. So we like to think, what life can this item go on to live beyond us? So a few examples. The soil you see here in Impact helped house Georgie's plants, which then got used in our most recent exhibition, Biosphere, which looks at the relationship between mental health and nature. The costumes from Impact, they got very muddy in Impact, and then they went on to get very gross in Slick as well, so you can see them. And then the armchair in Stop the World got taken home by Tina. It's in her lovely new flat. So if it's got any other purpose, we'll find a new purpose.
And if we can't think of where its next life would be, we don't get to use it. It's not something, we won't take something on if we don't have a plan for it afterwards.
Exactly. So on to costuming. We use 3 main methods with our costume and our design. So upcycling, repurposing, and experimenting. Upcycling is sourcing second-hand and pre-loved materials. It can be furniture, clothing, fabric, anything like that. It's just taking second-hand versions of that and giving it a new life. So on the screen here, you'll see our Stop the World costumes. That is all army gear, and the lab coat is an old scientist. And what we loved about using all the secondhand gear is it had little holes, it had little stains. I mean, the lab coat has some suspicious stains.
It does.
But it's all part of the story, and we always joked about what had that item of clothing done before it, became an actor with us. And the lab coat still makes me laugh. I like to think it's something insanely
it was like a Breaking Bad kind of thing.
Definitely. So we can change these things. So the skirt that the scientist is wearing, that was a pair of pants. I turned it into a skirt for him. So it's just about having fun and seeing what else these things can do. And I like to think, what was their story before they featured in ours? Repurposing is taking things that were intended for something else and then using them in another way. So maybe this thing was at the end of its life, or maybe it was destined for landfill, or maybe it just wanted a career change with us. There's always a use for something. So I've got an example here. This is a nurse's apron and a headdress that I made out of faulty PPE. So I used to work in a chemist during the pandemic, and we had a lot of PPE that was faulty. So things like the straps on the ears were completely, disconnected, or the holes, etc., and they would just be thrown away. And I scooped them up. I was like, they're not being chucked away. I'll use something. And what I love about repurposing these materials is there's an inherent message in the wear that wouldn't exist if I'd have used a conventional material. So if I'd have made this outfit out of cotton instead of masks, it wouldn't have the same message as it does with the PPE, because suddenly when you look at this, you are seeing a discussion on the nature of single-use items and waste just through an image. And then finally, my favorite one, experimentation. We love it here in Tenderfoot. It's at the core of sustainability in all sectors. Experimentation and curiosity is what drives the fight for sustainability forward. And curiosity is our greatest tool. So we use a material called kombucha SCOBY a lot, and is a really good example of how we experiment with things. Has anyone had kombucha tea before? I don't know. I hadn't heard of it before.
I'm not a fan of it. If you do want to try it, it's not like a tea. It's called a tea, but it's more like a kind of fizzy fermented drink.
It's like a juice, isn't it?
Yeah. They have it in Wetherspoons. If you want to give it a go, you're very welcome to.
It divided our company 50-50. It's like Marmite. But on the left there, you'll see the drink, which looks quite nice, pleasant. On the right is the waste byproduct called SCOBY. Now, the way the drink is made is it is fermented bacteria, essentially. You want it now. But the byproduct of it is these huge discs of organic matter. So it is completely biodegradable, like organic matter. And we have taken it and we've dried it out and turned it into kind of a faux leather kind of.
It's it's a plant-based leather, really.
And we have a whole method process on how to do this. It's on our Instagram highlight reels under methods if you were ever interested in trying it yourself. But it starts off as this really gooey, slimy.
It's quite fatty.
Yeah,
it's like actually, if you've ever eaten a steak that's got a significant chunk of fat down the side, that's basically the consistency of SCOBY.
Yeah, so the process is essentially drying it out. So that could be in many ways, but we used our oven. But if you have good weather, then it could probably be dried outside.
It can be air cured. The problem is it smells really bad. And so my poor housemates had to deal with about 6 months of me trying to dry it, I can't really meth lab style, in the garden. Honestly, it looked like, when police have to put like the white tents up because something terrible has happened. That's what it looked like. It was shocking.
So we tend then, after the British weather had failed us on that front, we tend to use an oven. And on the right there, you'll see what it looks like after it's dried. Now, after it's dried, you can cut it, you can sew it, you can do anything you like.
You can dye it.
Yeah, it's super strong. So I've got some examples of where we've used it in our work. So these are our impact masks. Now, the material on them is the kombucha SCOBY. Now, how we did this was we dried it to a point, and then once it was almost there, but still moldable and pliable and not hard yet, we molded it on the masks, and then we let them dry further, and it created this gorgeous technique. So this is before they were fully dry, and then that's when they were dry, and they're really durable, super good effect on them, and it looked organic, and a lot of people love the look of the masks.
It loses the smell as well. They smell lovely now. We have them now and they're fine.
Now I'm going to give a little content warning for the next slide. If you're squeamish of anything, blood, gore, guts, please look away. I will tell you when you can look back. We found a great use for the wet SCOBY is staged guts. If you put red food colouring in it, it just looks so
real.
It's really stringy and gross. And we had so many compliments after this scene from the audience members. They thought they did check in. They were like, "Is everything? Is that real?"
Should you ever need it, whatever theatre you want to go and make, we support you.
Yeah.
Should you ever need edible guts, this is how to do it.
That's how to do it.
Because you can consume it because it's all natural.
Yeah. Right, you can look back now. Anyone who's squeamish, it's gone. So we source our SCOBY from a kombucha company in Liverpool. It's called the Healthy Gut Company, and they are absolutely lovely. They aim for sustainability. They transport their stuff in a bike. It's great. And it is a byproduct, so it would be going to waste. Now, the lovely thing about this is the company came to watch Impact, and they got to see how their SCOBY was being used. Now, when we reached out to them to get their waste products, they couldn't fathom how we were going to use it, but they were like, "Sure, yeah, take it, but we're interested to see what you do with it," because they couldn't, they couldn't even imagine what we were going to do with it. So we invited them to come and see how it was used, and they were just blown away with the fact that we had such uses for a waste product that to them was just going to go in the bin, really. And so we connected with this local business, and we showed them the potential of the waste product, and we made them rethink. And I think everyone as well, kind of, after using this material, we saw new possibilities in other materials, and waste products suddenly don't become wasteful anymore. They have potential.
The beautiful thing with it being natural as well is that when the rest of Impact went on the compost heap, the masks and all the remaining kombucha could have gone with it. So some of the kombucha that we had left was able to just go straight on compost and actually helped it because it introduced a little bit more nitrogen to the mix. But we kept the masks because they're quite sentimental, but they can be composted should we need them.
Right. So eco costume in itself is an inherently political, expressive. It holds stories, feelings, and all of this past that comes with all of the secondhand clothing and all of the experimentation and the work put in to bring it to life. That inhabits every fiber of the clothing. So it's the designs, they spark curiosity, they spark debate as well, and they highlight issues elsewhere in the industry with fashion and such. And it's done in a thoughtful and fun way. And I think what I like most about them is the fact that it's a physical manifestation of the solution. So people can get up close and personal with it, and it makes sustainability accessible, it makes it fun, and it makes it tactile. People can touch and play. I mean, we had a sustainable costume exhibition where we put the SCOBYs in a bag, and we encouraged everyone to come and poke them, and everyone loved it. It was great. And so I think what if I can encourage you to take anything away from this design section is see the potential in things that you might not have seen the potential in before. Look high and low for new and fun materials that you can use in ways that you may not have ever thought to use them, and keep staying curious.
Absolutely. So moving on from production into storytelling. So storytelling with sustainable stories has to be navigated in a particular way in order to be successful, in our experience. And one of the key components is empathy. So empathy is obviously it's the relatability to another person's emotional state or set of circumstances. It's compassion, it's support, it's sympathy, it's all of these things that are key components in building a resilient, sustainable community. And theatre making and storytelling has a huge role to play in both building empathy and using empathy to help drive people towards climate action. So a little quote from our main man, David Attenborough, nature does not sit still. Things and individuals are changing, dying, and new things are coming. They're all stories. Every story that has ever been told and ever will be told exists within a wider ecosystem of our life. Some iteration of the ecosystem that we live within now, one that's existed in the past, or what this will go on to be. So crucially, with empathy, we craft our stories and our characters to have empathy at the heart of them, so that we're aiming to build communities that are resilient when it comes to climate change. The crucial thing with empathy is that the way you relate to a character is going to influence the way you feel about them and the way you would act if you were in their shoes. Now, another wonderful thing David Attenborough says, I really like David Attenborough today. So the quote I mentioned before is that, you know, we won't seek to protect something that we have nothing to do with. We have to have an innate personal relationship to the world around us and to nature and to other species to feel that need to protect them and to work in the best interests of the climate. So the crucial thing with empathy is that if we can build empathy between people and space, people and other people, people and other species, we're building a network of empathetic individuals with one shared focus towards sustainability. Now, the way we do that, excuse the title of the book, it is a wonderful book, sorry that it swears. So the way that we do that is we work a lot with archetypes. Archetypes are recognizable by everyone in every context because they are so concentrated into the form of their being. Exactly. Right. Yeah. So the best way that we can empathize with someone is by seeing a part of ourselves in them. And so by using archetypes, we're developing these characters where, because of their kind of fundamental nature, you can see parts of yourself, or you might see parts of people you know, or people that you've met in your life, and you relate to those characters on an immediate level. So the way that we do that is we work a lot with mask. Obviously, you've seen the impact masks. Those were obviously used in performance, but with every production we've done, we've used mask behind the scenes as a way of kind of distilling ourselves back down to neutral, and then building these people who are there to be bridge building between audience. Instantly recognizable. Yeah, instantly recognizable. So the photo in the bottom left, some Disney villains, really good example of archetypes. You know, they follow the same kind of pattern of villain. And so we use mask, which is of course one of the oldest forms of theatre as well, which is nice that that's kind of been passed through. Now, the way that, or the benefits of us using mask is that with impact, it allowed us to create characters that were able to be neutral when they needed to be. Impact spanned thousands of years and millions of years in the space of 50 minutes. So we had characters existing in lots of different time periods within the same space. But those characters themselves didn't change. They remained fundamentally who they are. And so by being able to kind of start at neutral and build these recognizable characters, because they were built archetypically, they made sense in every single time period they existed within, and they were recognizable to people within every single time period. You could see yourself in the dawn of time. You could see yourself now. You could see yourself in the future. This also helped us with Stop the World, because the archetypes that we built were less traditional, but more focused on key players in the climate conversation. So we were building an archetype of the scientist, the politician, the lovers, the women, the young people. And all of these characters, because again, they were distilled down to their fundamental essence, you were able to see yourself and the people that you recognize in those characters. And because we built a performance environment and people were invited into that space, it was a way of bridging the gap and helping audiences to feel like they were a part of the climate conversation. They can see themselves mattering within that story. So, bit of psychology. Love a bit of psychology. People might be familiar with Maslow's hierarchy. So Maslow's hierarchy of needs or pyramid of needs, essentially looks at all the different things that people need in order to be happy and healthy. So the graphic just over to the left, right at the bottom as a fundamental kind of building block are your physiological needs. So these are things like shelter and food and water. On top of that, we then have safety and security, your physical safety, your emotional safety. On top of that, we then have love and belonging. So this is about being part of a community, feeling like you have support around you, feeling like you have friendships and relationships. On top of that, you then have your self-esteem. This is how you view yourself, having autonomy, feeling like you have things about yourself that you like. And on top of that, you then have self-actualization, which is the point that we reach where we feel that we are ready to move forward and make change and progress and grow. Now, the reason that we talk about Maslow's hierarchy is that when we're talking about sustainability and climate change in the stories that we tell, we're looking at something that can be very, very anxiety inducing. We're talking about something that can and possibly will and already is leading to suffering, to pain, to loss, to death, to complete restructuring of the way that we know life. That can be a really, really overwhelming and paralyzing topic if it's not handled with care. And so we use Maslow's hierarchy as what we call the eco-anxiety bridge. So with every show that we put on, we go in with an understanding that where we need people to be is at the point of self-actualization. That's where the climate action is going to happen. And no one can be expected to reach that point if the fundamental needs underneath aren't being met. So it's important to hold space to ensure that people are being able to engage on the best level that they can, and to make sure that we are meeting those emotional needs through the stories that we're telling, if we're going to have a hope in hell of trying to band together for climate action. So the way that we do that is through something called the hope principle. So the hope principle states that good eco-theatre should offer two things. The first is realistic hope. Now, both of those words are equally important. Hope is very important, not least because it's true and it's possible. I don't believe for a second that we are absolutely without hope. There is hope to be had. But crucially, it has to be realistic. And when we're telling stories, we have to be able to offer the possibility of a good ending, a happy ending, but through a realistic lens. It wouldn't be ethical for us to be telling stories that say, and then we just clicked our fingers and everything was fine, and then everyone lived happily ever after, no one changed anything, and everything was great, because that's not what the world looks like. But what we can offer is the hope that is realistic. A good example of this is with Stop the World. So spoilers, the show's not on tour, no one's going to see it, so sorry, this is going to ruin the ending. So Ava and Caden get to bring their baby into the world. That's the thing that they've been fighting for this whole time, to be able to have that space, to be able to start a family and build a life for themselves. And they repair so many of the interpersonal conflicts that were preventing them from building that better world. And so they get to bring this child into the world, hopeful, they have a future. But the future that they're living in is within the context of a bunker that will never quite run at full capacity again. There are sacrifices that they've had to make. Certain things we'll never be able to go back to. But that doesn't mean we can't still build a hopeful, meaningful life surrounded by community. The second thing that we look to offer is achievable action. And this is something that we offer through character modeling. So achievable action is looking at the potential crisis or turmoil that we throw our characters into, and looking at the possible ways that they could fix this, that are they're real, they're realistic, and they're things that people can actually do without needing copious amounts of money or ridiculous amounts of power. Just everyday human beings that are able to have this achievable action. And we can see that modeled through the characters that we use, so that the audiences are not only in that experience with us, but they get to see modeled crisis, action, and then cause and effect of that action or inaction. And that all then goes to towards offering people a tangible solution, something that they can then take away so that they leave that show not just feeling like it's something they can talk about, but it's something that they can do. So finally, on to running a sustainable studio. So we've looked at production, we've looked at storytelling. This is now about the rehearsal room and about how we function as a theatre company and what we look like as a group of people trying to make sustainable work. So there's a few different ways you can run a sustainable rehearsal studio. The first one is through digital scripts. So you will have seen with the footage from Impact, we had paper scripts. That was the last time we used a paper script. With every production that we've made since, we use a digital master copy of the script that is then made accessible online for everyone to access. The beautiful thing about this is that you are not printing multiple scripts to begin with, so you're saving on paper. But every single edit, every change, every time a line gets cut or a different stage direction happens, it all goes into this one big living script, and everyone has access to the same document. So all your notes are in there, absolutely everything is viewable. So we're never having to reprint. We're never having to, waste paper by ripping pages out and sticking new ones in. And it's just a completely digital resource that everyone has access to. And it's also something that can be made more accessible than a paper script as well. You have the option of different font sizes and overlays and things like that can really, really help. Secondly, you can look at minimizing energy use. So things like, do you need the lights on? Do you need the heating on? If you do need the lights on, can you have them on just for the time that you need them? With all of our shows, we have a dark hour. So we will power everything down for an hour just before the show. And then we'll only power it back on when we actually need to use it. So that we're not having that kind of passive electricity waste. Using outdoor studios, we absolutely love rehearsing outside. When the weather allows. We've rehearsed in parks, in the woods, on the beach. We absolutely love it. Being outdoors is not only fantastic for your creative process, but it's great for your health. It's really good to go and get some fresh air. And if you can go out and use the light that the universe gives us via the sun, that is wonderful. But if you are going to rehearse indoors, then thinking about studios that have good public transportation links. As a company, we're based kind of all over the Northwest. We're mostly based in Ormskirk, but we've got people based in Liverpool, in Manchester, in Chester. Until recently, it was North Wales. And so Ormskirk really is a base for us, was somewhere that everyone could reach via public transport. So we could really minimise the car emissions from us travelling in. And Ormskirk itself, we're very lucky, has really good public transport links internally as well. So we can kind of get about quite well. So yeah. Then get moving to get warm. Do you need the heating on? Can you do a really high intensity warm up? That is the question we often ask ourselves during the winter.
Sometimes it's okay.
Yeah, sometimes it's okay. That's the thing. It's all about acting within the capacity that you have. I'm not at any point saying the only way you can rehearse sustainably is if you go outside and do it right now in the pitch black and pouring rain. But yeah, if you think about whether or not you do need the heating on, or whether or not you can kind of just get moving, have a dance party to get the vibes up in the studio. Bringing food and water in reusable tubs. So we're committed to a zero waste studio. So we bring our lunches, we bring water, all in reusable tubs. Just means that we're not having to buy things that are then, single-use packaging and adding to kind of the waste of the company. And finally, the most crucial one is the recognition that everyone's voice matters. So we don't work with a hierarchy in the studio. We have a director, and that director's role is to kind of keep an anchor on the project. And we have a project manager who again will have a kind of anchor to put down. But everyone's voice matters within that room, and we openly encourage conversation about staging and devising and delivery that's really collaborative. And the beautiful thing about that is that, number one, no one man's vision is ever going to be as creatively informed as something that has been pulled apart and critiqued and developed by a full group all striving towards the same aim. So you come out with a far more creative project than you would have had it just been run by one person. And secondly, the the stories that we end up telling are informed by the conversations of every person in that room. And so everyone has part of their identity tied up in that project, which really brings me to the fundamental part, which is about reflecting in your rehearsal room the community that you wish to see outside. It's all about modeling behavior. And so it wouldn't be fair for us to make sustainable work and talk about how sustainable our work is and then not be sustainable ourselves in the room and in our own lives. It's really important that in those spaces we are holding space for community, for collaboration, for listening, for diversity, for accessibility, all of the things that we want to see in a more sustainable world. It can start at home, and that can be home like your home, and it can be home like your studio and your people. We do that in a multitude of ways. The first one is our rehearsal room rulebook. So this is basically just like a code of conduct that we all sign on to, that basically means that we all sign up to the same community values. It's all to do with how we treat others, how we treat ourselves, how we manage our workloads, how we are sustainable, and how we kind of want to build sustainable communities within the room. We also break bread all the time. We are constantly eating together, sharing food, making food, baking, going for food all the time. Breaking bread and having that time to bond with people outside of the work and over food is a really intrinsically human thing, and something that's so crucial to community building. And we also go swimming all the time. Most of the time on a Monday before we get into the studio, we'll all go and get our bodies moving and do some exercise. We're all doing the Diabetes UK Swim 22 at the moment, which means you have to swim the channel, which is so much further than we thought it was. But we are getting there. So the next steps. When we look back at the start of this talk and we look at all of the different ways that theatre might not be doing so well, it's really important to look at the ways that theatre is. We're not the only company that are working this way. Lots and lots of companies, whether or not they are dedicated to sustainability in the stories they tell or just in the practices, lots and lots of companies are doing lots of wonderful things to make this happen. And this is just our way of doing it. It's really crucial that we're always evolving and we're always learning, and we're always learning from our mistakes. And so what we would pass on to you as people that are making these productions for the first time is to do whatever you can. That doesn't mean do everything. You don't have to produce, this completely carbon neutral, wonderful, incredible, zero waste piece, though that would be amazing. This is more about just doing what you have the capacity to do and what you have the capacity to change, and being experimental with it. So what we would invite you to do is take a sustainable pledge. So think about just one element of theatre making that you are involved in. It might be that you are an actor, you're a designer, you're a director, you're kind of a little bit of everything. But just think about one element of your making process and think about how you might look to make just that one thing greener. And that's all we ask, that you just take one little thing and just pledge to focus your energy, maybe for the next kind of 4 weeks, on looking into how that could be done a little bit greener. So this has been us. That was Eco Theatre, the art of sustainability. So I've popped speaker details and also the link to our website and our social media on there. But we have got about 15 minutes and we'd like to open it up to a Q&A. If anyone does have any questions or any comments, do let us know. Additional resources can be found on our website and also on our socials. And there's more to come. We're just about to release the programme for Slick, which has loads of detail into how we made a sustainable film. So we'll keep you up to date with that. But I'm going to stop sharing my screen now and open it up to the floor.
That's been amazing. Thank you so much. That's been, and hopefully really useful to kind of for everybody to hear that. I think we've got somebody here we've either got somebody here or who's asked for the recording from each team, so, and from kind of where the bees fly and stuff. So hopefully that can be passed on. I was just going to ask kind of what do you ask audiences to provide? Kind of how do you communicate with audiences in terms of their participation, and do you ask for their kind of data in terms of how they're traveling, where they're traveling, all that sort of thing?
So there's a few different things that we can do. It really depends on the project. So if we're touring, obviously we take into accountability with all of the tour venues that we book. We've got a minimum standard that has to be hit for each of the venues. So it has to have minimum levels of accessibility, minimum levels of sustainability, and also has to be situated somewhere that has either very good public transport links or, for example, we toured to Millom in Cumbria, that is literally just this really close-knit rural community, and everyone kind of walks to the venue. And that's wonderful. We're developing ways at the moment of kind of tracking the carbon footprint of the touring shows a bit better. Julie's Bicycle has an absolutely fantastic, they ran a scheme over the Fringe. There's also carbon calculators online that we've been using. But in terms of gathering data, we've mostly been relying on kind of word of mouth, chatting to audiences at the end, but we are looking into developing more digital frameworks.
Yeah, we always tend to have a Q&A after our shows, and if not a staged Q&A after the show, a physical, go to the audience, have a chat, but sometimes hours. It feels like.
True.
So I think it's more like, instead of collecting hard data for us, it's more that bridging the gap and having those conversations, because that's how we kind of collected info on people.
Any other questions?
I mean, I've got 1,000 questions, but I think that's because I'm a little bit of a dinosaur. So the whole concept is totally new to me. I guess, how would you inspire, this is a personal question really, but an older generation who are very kind of set in there? Do you find it hard to access, the older generation that are sort of set in their ways with regards to how theatre is run and how to source their materials and all of that kind of thing?
So I think we had this strange phenomenon with our last show, where most of our audience members were of an older generation, where we had targeted the play itself at younger people, and younger people who are family planning. Now, in actuality, the actual demographic we had to view it, a lot of people who were in the, I'd say, 50 plus category, and it was lovely and absolutely amazing having these conversations with them, because the thing that inspired everyone in the room was the fact that it was a simple love story, and the sustainability was layered over that. So it was less so about, we always had the same feedback of, oh, I thought it would be preachy. But it was really human. So I think, I know you asked about the methods and people being stuck in the ways of the methods, but I think first comes making it really human, making it really, the story is a love story, but it just so happens that it's in a climate apocalypse. And so I think on an audience level, that's how we managed to bridge that gap with people who are stuck in their ways. In terms of the methodology, it is sometimes difficult, because, as I explained, we have some really kooky ideas like the kombucha, and I'm not expecting everyone to go away and find bacteria and dry it out in the kitchen. But there's things that we can use that are accessible for other reasons than sustainability. So things like the secondhand clothing, you can approach it from a way of like thriftiness. So
economic.
Yeah. If someone doesn't really care about the climate, that's fine, but do you want to save some money?
Eco theatre is so cheap to make.
Yeah.
It is so cheap, because everything is just found and salvaged and stuff that you've already got or you've borrowed. We have been running for 4 years. We have not been funded once. We have done absolutely everything out of back pockets. And while it hasn't always been, Edinburgh was, that was bankrupting. But other than that, in terms of actually making the work, it is so accessible. I think what potentially puts people off is that theatre as an industry has always run on kind of we have our ways of doing things. We have set ways of doing it. And as theatre makers, that is literally what we're trained to do. We are trained to do the same thing in the same order over and over and over again to get the same result. So sometimes it's just about making the methods more accessible. We're working on something at the moment called the Eco Theatre Manifesto, which is essentially much like the Theatre Green Book, but for grassroots companies. So the Theatre Green Book is absolutely fantastic. It's a brilliant resource. There are quite a lot of prerequisites in it, things like having control over the building that you work in that most companies don't have the benefit of, and things like that. So we're kind of not to rival it, more to go alongside it. That we're looking at developing this resource that is aimed at the very easy things that people can do when they have absolutely no resources available to them.
Yeah, I think it's just about framing, and as well, a lot of our stuff is community focused, so it's inviting a community. Everyone likes to be part of a community, so even if the sustainability aspect later on, it's about connecting.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of the work that I've done as well has been with schools, and particularly primary schools. There's so much paper, there's so much resource that goes into creating even a school show. Do you find, like, do you try to do any work with schools and sort of get them to turn their sort of viewpoint around? Because I think that's another sort of corner of the theatre world where, you know, change really could be made with children that are growing up now, you know.
Absolutely. I mean, so we're in the process of rolling out our kind of educational rollout. So we've been working over the last year with kind of 16 to 25-year-old, that kind of demographic. We're working with the university quite a lot to do a lot of research and practice into how we can embed sustainability into the higher education curriculum. But the beautiful thing about higher education is that, you know, most of it is young people doing things digitally anyway. And you're absolutely right. Yeah. It's younger demographics. You do have an awful lot of waste. My partner's a trainee teacher, and the sheer amount of paper that exists within that job is enough to give me a heart attack.
It is literally unbelievable. Yeah, it's unbelievable. And school shows and assemblies and all the things that are created costume wise, and then it all either goes in the bin or in a cupboard, or, you know, it's
but at the same time, you know, we've had really positive response from the schools that we have worked with. There's been a lot of positive response because the approach that we take is, okay, look, you're going to be using these resources, you're going to make this mess anyway. What can we do with the mess? If you can take all of this stuff that you've been using in other areas, and you know it's just paper waste or it's just whatever, what can we now go and turn it into? So we run a workshop all about secondhand theatre that can be kind of tailored to any age. And so we'll go into schools, work with those classrooms to make a piece of theatre out of just the stuff that they've already got going in the bin. And the reception's really good. Really good.
That's fantastic.
In terms of the practical methods around paper consumption, like Georgia said there, in our secondhand theatre workshop, one of the sections is found text. So things like finding, you know, receipts in your bag, or a worksheet on maths or something, and finding text from that and using that as a script. So you're reusing that paper. And then another one that we're looking to implement into more future workshops is we're doing a cafe event where we are working with the community, and the questions are going to be people are going to have to write their answers on tablecloths, and then the tablecloths are going to be used as set decoration for a piece further down the line. And I think in terms of primary schools, I think this could be a really good way of getting people to write their thoughts down and stuff in terms of theatre, because then you've got something physical that can be kept as a memory, and not just chucked in the bin.
Yeah, absolutely. Things like that.
Oh, I love it. I absolutely love it. We've got contact with so many schools as well. I'd love to put you in touch with our outreach coordinator, Jess, and just to help her as well, and us when we go into schools, how we can, you know, all of that can be a lot more sustainable with what we're doing.
Absolutely. I mean, we've got some resource packs that we're developing at the moment that kind of outline the workshops and all of the resources with that. So yeah, if there's anything we can work with you on, that would be fantastic.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you.
Awesome. I think we've got about 5 minutes. So if there's any other questions.
I was just going to ask kind of, so I think on each, we've got kind of at least a person or a way into each of the kind of productions that, well, 5 productions that are going on with RicNic this summer. How you touched on a bit in Hannah's question of how do you suggest that the people who are here now kind of pitch it to the rest of their teams of we should do X or we should do Y or we should be, or yes, it might be slightly more expensive in this area, but we should go for sustainable flyers. Kind of how, I guess the answer would be this whole talk, but kind of if you could condense that briefly into kind of a production meeting discussion a bit, how would you suggest that's kind of pitched?
There's certain methods I'd recommend pitching it in a way of how fun experimenting and curiosity can be with these methods. So the things like, oh guys, why don't we try and find an alternative method of making this costume? Like, why don't we try natural dye instead? That could be really fun because it's a new process that we've tried together. It's something new. Framing things that are, because at the end of the day, we're doing a craft, aren't we? We're creating something. That's what we love to do, and that's why we're in this industry. And so honing in on the fact that this is creation, this is exciting, this is play, I think is, I'd say for those types of methods. But with the admin,
well, I mean, so this probably might sound awful. You should do it first and foremost because you should. If that's not enough, do it because you can. And if that's not enough, do it because the Arts Council have started asking that everyone writes sustainability reports on every single thing that you pitch. So if you plan on making your own work outside of this context at any point in the future, sustainability is going to be something that you're going to have to engage with, whether you want to or not.
You can refer back to this project and say, well, we chose to use sustainable flyers instead of regular flyers because we wanted to focus on sustainability. And then that is something that you can pop down in those kinds of sustainability reports in the future if that's ever needed.
It's, you know, it's such an integral thing for so much of the industry now, and you know, a lot of funding bodies have, you know, minimum benchmarks you have to be hitting just for your project to be considered. So whether or not you go and make theatre that is about sustainability, knowing how to make it in a sustainable way and being able to kind of historically back that up and say, this is what we did and this is how it was sustainable, is going to benefit you in the long term as makers, regardless of what end of the industry you go into.
It also is also worth mentioning, as George said at the show, that, you know, it is about taking one thing and being able to do that to the best of your capacity. You don't have the budget for things like sustainable flyers. Put that energy into something that you can do yourself. So I didn't touch on it in the talk, but things like natural dyeing, you can dye clothes with onions, that sort of stuff.
Coffee, ice.
So so even if you don't have a budget to stretch for some areas, make up for that in other areas. It's about giving.
Yeah. Hopefully that helps.
Yeah.
I think we've got time for maybe just one more, if there is one more. If not, we will leave you to
if you do have any further questions later on down the line, maybe you're lying in bed awake at 3 a.m. in 2 weeks' time and think, oh, I could have asked that. We on our website we've got emails there, and we've also got our social medias. We'll always answer direct message. Like that, absolutely. With any help you need.
I actually just had a quick question. You mentioned earlier that you've never been funded, right? How much would you say that, let's say your what was it, the one set in the tube station, how much did that cost?
Yeah, no, that's totally acceptable question. So Stop the World, we split that into 2 different things. We look at the tour and then we look at Edinburgh, because Edinburgh, lots of people aren't going to Edinburgh this year because it's become too expensive.
Just to clarify, was it the specific costs of the materials to create the show, or are you talking about the tour itself, or both? Or
I suppose materials, I guess, because that's well, I suppose the whole tour maybe, but materials more in particular.
Not a lot.
Source the costumes. So the costume came under £100 for the whole thing, probably even less than that. And
less than 50.
I'd say between 60, 70,
okay,
80. Yeah. So that was for a 5-person cast, but we ended up having at least 3 alternate outfits. So we're talking about 8 8 costumes in total for under £100, and that was all secondhand. The investment is, so there's 3 investments to costume design and set design, in my opinion. There's money, there's time, and then there's effort. So with sustainability, the money is not that much sometimes, as long as you've got the time and the effort. So we're talking about collecting these costume pieces over the span of a year. And I'm sure you don't have that much time for your pieces. So if then you don't have the time or the budget, then it's about effort. It's about hitting like 15 charity shops in a day and really banding it together. But it didn't cost a lot. And then for these set pieces themselves, the things that we paid for was the table cost £10. The chairs were free.
Yeah, chairs we borrowed. The generator was a table that we edited.
The generator was £5, and then the backdrop we already had. So we got everything. We were we borrowed off everyone could, or we borrowed out of our own homes, or we went to charity shops. So yeah, it is, when we say it's thrifty, it's quite thrifty.
The most expensive thing about Stop the World was Edinburgh, and the next expensive thing was probably the travel. Other than that, everything was really, really, really affordable. And it's the only way that we have been able to kind of do this without being funded. You know, we're as a company, everyone within the company comes from, we've got quite a width of socioeconomic backgrounds, but predominantly the company's working class. You know, we're not kind of sat on some sort of like hidden theatrical trust fund. This was all just coming from us, you know, working overtime and stuff like that. But you know, we've said consistently the whole way through, making the show, one person could have funded it easily. So yeah, it's affordable, very affordable.
That's great. Well, thank you.
eBay is your best friend as well. Yes. You can find some really good stuff on eBay.
Vinted's brilliant. Okay, in terms of how experimental you want to get, buy secondhand online, buy secondhand in person, jump in a skip, find things on the side of the road. All of these things we have done. Or go to events and end up chatting to people and come away with weird things. Myself and our media producer went to an event about 3 months ago, and we thought we were just going to like an exhibition, and then we came away with about 3 sheep's worth of raw wool that they just happened to have there, and now we've got that, and that's about to get turned into to costume and all of that. It just, you know, you find things in weird places, and yeah, sometimes
it's
it
just
is
about connecting with others, because if you sometimes you don't think to ask, but if you ask, people often have stuff lying around that they're looking to get rid of anyway. So.
Yeah, or borrow. You can borrow stuff from us if you want. If you have something in mind and you're like, I wonder if Tenderfoot have it, drop us an email. We might, and we will happily lend out. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, thank you very much. Appreciate it, and I'm sure we'll keep that in mind as well.
Absolutely. Yes. Well, I think we're at time. We've run slightly over, but that's okay. Thank you so much for having us. It's been absolutely lovely.
It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, and hopefully you've picked up some little tips and tricks to use in the productions that you're going to be making moving forward. We're hopefully going to try and come and see them. Looking at Josh for some reassurance.
We'll get you in and see them definitely. But
yeah, we'd love to be able to come and see them.
Yeah, if that wasn't an incentive to do it all, just do it so Tenderfoot can come and see it and come and see that you're actually putting that session to use. But that's been brilliant. Thank you so much for that. I know we've got quite a few people who are looking forward to the recording as well. People who are here, if there's any bits you want to go back over, I'll send that out tomorrow as well. But no, that's been brilliant. Thank you so much.
Thank you so
and
much.
go and follow Tenderfoot on all the socials and check out their work. Check out Slick.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much, both of you.
Oh, thank you. We will hopefully see you all soon.
Cool. Thanks, guys. Bye.
Bye.